Chapter 21. There is no redemption. In full tactical gear, I believe I could have run the 500 yards in just under 2 minutes. However, I did not see any need to hurry at this point. Far better to walk and conserve energy. Jason had slowly lifted his head when the two idiots had stopped firing. He watched in dumbfounded befuddlement as I shot his two friends. Tay was quite dead. Darius was lying on the ground in a fetal position, clutching what was left of his genitalia. Jason finally looked around and spotted me. He stood slowly as I approached. I could see the animosity in his eyes as I got close. I looked over at Darius a moment. He was whimpering pathetically. I felt no guilt or pity. I might have once, but those days were over. I retrieved my radio from my cargo pocket. "What's your status?" "Good to go," she answered. "Same here. Stand by," I responded. Julie answered my transmission with a click of her talk button. Good girl. I propped my foot on the front bumper of the Stratus and pointedly stared at Jason while pointing my rifle at his midsection. "Zach, I didn't have a choice. They've got Macy. They're holding her hostage," Jason whined. Darius groaned feebly. He was dying. Jason nervously looked over at him. "Zach, I'm begging you. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, man." His face was oily with a mixture of sweat and grime. I motioned with the rifle. "Slowly take the gun out that you're hiding and toss it." He paused for a moment and then reached into his back waistband, pulled out a black revolver and threw it to the ground. I nodded, picked it up and inspected it. It was a .22 caliber Ruger. Loaded, but very dirty. It looked familiar. I tossed it in the weeds. I then looked at him and sighed. Why didn't the two of you get away from that group, huh? Isn't that what I suggested? Leave and start a new life. Just the two of you and your unborn child. Jason's mouth dropped open and he held up his hands as if to say, "I don't know why the hell I didn't listen to you, but I see the wisdom in your logic now." I sighed. Ah, Jason, what a history the two of us have in such a short time. You know, we've never really talked on a one-to-one level. Let's do that. So, let's see, where do we start? Let's recap our history together. I had never done anything to you. I was just a lowly sophomore, head over heels in love with a pretty girl, and you were the hotshot senior athlete. You had a lot of teenage girls who were dying to drop their panties for you, but instead you steal my girl. And then you punch me out. Although I guess I can understand your reaction a little bit. After all, I did take a swing at you. But you had size on me back then. You could have just grabbed me in a bear hug and wrestled me to the ground. Did you know, on that day, I had just come from the hospital? My grandmother, the only family I had, just died. Did you know that? I asked. Jason started to protest. I held up my hand. Hush, I'm talking. So, where was I? Oh yeah, I took a swing at you, you knocked me down, and then you let your boys kick the shit out of me. Now, granted, you pulled them off me, but you let them put the boots to me for just a few seconds before you intervened. I watched the video. How could I not? It was sent to me the next day. I saw you stand there motionless with that damn smirk on your face for just a little bit longer than necessary before stopping them. So, who put the video on YouTube? Trina, he answered. I had nothing to do with it. I shook my head. I may have believed you once, but I'm not so sure anymore. I'm thinking you pulled the usual Jason Argus pattern of behavior. You condemn the action, but only after the fact. I shrugged. Oh, hell, it's a moot point, I guess. So, where was I? Oh yeah, I do ramble on sometimes, so I'll skip everything else and fast forward to the present. You and Macy decide to come begging for food. What did I do, Jason? He stared at me in silence. Answer me, please. You gave us food. His response was emotionless. I nodded somberly. In spite of our past, I gave the two of you food so you could survive and have your kid. I wanted to help you too, you stupid shit. I had lowered my voice a bit. Go over there and look in the damn cooler. He reluctantly did as I directed. Look at all of those beautiful fresh steaks. I told you guys to bring stuff for trading. I'm betting you did not even bother, am I right? I asked. He looked at the steaks. He was so hungry that I thought for a second he'd grab one and start eating it raw, even with all of the fresh bullet wounds. I knew you'd show up empty-handed, but I was gonna give those steaks to you anyway. But a little nagging voice kept telling me you'd bring your boys with you. Hell, if all of you came in peace, even Darius, I was still gonna give those steaks to you, I said quietly. I just wanted you to know it. You betrayed me, Jason. He held his hands out and he looked around as if he was looking for his ever-present homeboys to come to his defense, and eventually spotted Darius. I guess he had forgotten all about him. Man, why did you shoot my boy like that? Can't you do something for him? I shrugged my shoulders. Of course. I set my rifle down against the front bumper of his car and walked over to Darius. He was bleeding profusely and had lost consciousness by now. I retrieved my lock-blade knife, bent down, and slit his throat. He gurgled once and then became still. He was going to die anyway. I merely hastened the process by a few seconds. I avoided the spurting blood from the neck wound, wiped the knife blade on his jacket, stood up and turned. Jason had my rifle. He had his finger on the trigger and the barrel pointed at me. You should put the weapon down, I said. He ignored my suggestion and brought the rifle up to his shoulder. I would prefer you not do that. His mouth dropped open and he arched his eyebrows in mock surprise. Oh, you would prefer it. You would prefer it. Fuck you and your preferences. You had your chance. Instead, you just had to go running your punk mouth. Now shut the fuck up, because now it's my turn to talk. You are a fucking loser, Zach Gunderson. You always have been. You think that since the world went to hell, now you're something special because you got a supply of food, and we don't? Fuck you, Zach. Fuck you. I think he was trying to tell me something. You ain't nothing. I nodded my head and tried to act as if I was duly chastened. I'm sure your friends would agree with you. Well, if I hadn't killed them, but if they were alive, they would certainly agree with you. Oh well, fuck them. More steaks for you, right? He continued glaring at me. I think my facetious logic confused him. Jason, I'm asking you to put the rifle down. I can help you get Macy. I don't want your fucking help, Zach. I'm going to kill you and that old man, wherever he is, and then I'm going to get Macy. We're going to move in your fucking house, we're going to eat your fucking food, and I'm going to fuck her in your own fucking bed. You sure do say fuck a lot, I lamented. A limited vocabulary is an overt indicator of stupidity. Did you know that? Or are you too stupid to comprehend how utterly stupid you really are? In case you're wondering, yes, I was goading him. It worked. Spittle flew out of his mouth as he screamed, "Shut the fuck up!" He took aim and fired. No, not really. He took aim and pulled the trigger. The rifle was empty. I had unloaded it during the casual stroll from Rick's Hill to the bridge. I shook my head and sighed. You are one dumb fucker. He tried to work the action of the rifle, but apparently was unfamiliar with it. So, out of frustration, he yelled and charged me with the rifle held high over his head. I'm sure he had seen this move in one of those old World War II movies. I guess he thought he was going to bash my head in with the buttstock. I had my Glock, but did not bother using it. When he got close enough to touch me, I deftly sidestepped him and thrust my knife with a backhand stab into the side of his neck. He grunted in sudden pain, reached for it, but I pulled it out before he could grab it. I had hit an artery. He was going to bleed out in a matter of seconds. He grabbed at his neck where the knife had entered. Blood spurted between his fingers. I changed my grip on the knife, took a lunging step and stabbed him again. This one entered just below his sternum. It was merely for good measure. He dropped the rifle and fell to the ground. The stab in the neck was probably adequate. Without an ambulance to come save him, he would have bled out. But I wanted to make sure. This man was and had been an albatross around my neck. I sat down beside Mr. Jason Argus and waited for the shakes to stop, as I watched him exhale his last breath in a bloody gurgle. I squeezed my eyes shut for a long minute after his final death rattle. When I opened them again, my breathing had slowed and the shakes had abated. I was surprised at how much rage I had for him, but I worked it out, I think. Good riddance. I gave him every chance I could to make amends with him. I looked around and surveyed all of the damage. In addition to the shot-up truck, ruined cooler, bullet-infested steaks, he had dropped Rick's beautiful rifle. I picked it up and inspected it for damage. There was a small scratch on the stock, but more importantly, the scope was broken. Damn. I checked myself for any injuries and then retrieved some hand sanitizer out of the glove box. While I was lost in thought, the Dodge Stratus started up and backed out quickly. Who the hell was in the car? The driver did a 180-degree fishtail, threw it in drive, and floored it before I could even react. The sunlight was glaring off of the windshield, preventing me from seeing who was driving. I retrieved my Glock and managed to shoot once before it rounded the curve. I retrieved my radio. "The car is coming out. Take care of it." I got a click in reply. I guess it was time to see what kind of metal she had. I started running toward Julie. Julie gasped when she heard the gunshots. It was a frenzied staccato of fire from at least 2 rifles. She became worried until she heard the booming report of Zach's high-powered rifle. It had a quite distinctive sound. There was a minute of silence, and then she heard more gunfire. It was followed by another report of Zach's rifle. She knew, well, she hoped that all was good. Zach was a really good shot. He confirmed it a moment later on the radio. She breathed a sigh of relief until she remembered that there were 3 of them and she only heard Zach shoot twice. She looked around for any threats, but the immediate area, or what Zach called her AO, area of operation, was deathly quiet. She sat in silence. It seemed like an eternity had passed since Zach had spoken to her. She was getting worried again. She thought she heard yelling and the faint sounds of a struggle, but could not be sure. A few more minutes passed, and then she heard tires squealing. "The car is coming out. Take care of it," Zach shouted into the radio. Julie keyed the microphone once in acknowledgement. It must be Jason. He's escaped. She checked her weapon once more, making sure that this time she had the selector lever set to fire. She was ready. The car appeared. She had a brief moment of anxiety as she wondered where to aim first. The radiator? The tires, or through the window? She chose the latter. Julie fired 3 quick rounds where the driver should be sitting, fired 3 rounds into the front grille, and then shot continuously as the car drove by and approached the intersection. The car continued through the intersection and crashed into the ditch on the far side of the roadway. Julie stared at it, stupefied for a moment. Then she realized she had the rifle in a death grip and could not feel anything from the waist down. She wondered if she might have been shot. She pried one of her hands loose and started feeling around her face and torso. Satisfying herself that there were no unnatural holes in her body, she climbed out of the sniper position and slowly started walking toward the wrecked car. She held the AR-15 stiffly in front of her and got to the middle of the road before stopping suddenly. The car's engine was revving at a high rate of speed, as if the driver had the accelerator mashed to the floor. She felt the sudden need to reload the weapon. She took a hard look at the car and tried to spot any movement through the windows. Nothing. She fumbled with the release button and got the empty magazine to drop, fumbled with the tactical vest, finally got a firm grip of a loaded magazine, and was able to get it seated in the rifle in one try. Tugging on it to make sure it was seated properly, it suddenly dawned on her that standing in the middle of the road with no cover was a very stupid place to reload one's weapon. She was glad Zach did not see the faux pas. She inched her way forward to the car, finally made it to the driver's side, and peered in. It was Chad. His head was tilted forward, and it looked a bit like he was sleeping. The driver's window was either busted out or rolled down. She shouted to him over the noise of the engine. "Chad, turn the damn car off." He ignored her. "I said turn the car off." This time, she nudged his shoulder with the barrel of the rifle to emphasize her demand. His head rolled. That was when she saw the right side of his head. Somehow, the .223 caliber bullet did not penetrate all the way through. Its shape was probably deformed when it passed through the passenger side window. The window must have slowed the velocity of the bullet enough so that once it entered the skull, it stayed there. Somewhere, she heard a small voice telling her she had missed all of the front shots and did not hit Chad until he was driving past. She hoped Zach would not notice. She continued staring at Chad. He was quite dead. She was still staring at him when she heard Zach's voice. I ran as fast as I could. It was about a 100-yard jaunt around a blind curve. I had no visual whatsoever of Julie and what may have happened. I had heard the gunshots, but could not be sure they all came from her weapon. As I came around the curve, I first spotted the black Dodge Stratus wrecked on the far side of the 2-lane roadway. I then spotted Julie standing beside the driver's side. I slowed, held my handgun at the ready position, and approached slowly. I took slow, deep breaths. "Julie!" I yelled. She didn't seem to hear me or was ignoring me. "Julie, it's me. I'm walking up." I definitely did not want her to shoot me accidentally. I stared hard at the car, wondering who or what she was looking at. I finally got beside her and gently touched her on the shoulder to let her know I was there. She finally turned her head toward me as I was peering inside the car. It was Chad, and he was quite dead. Walking over, I carefully looked in the floorboards to make sure there was nobody else. Satisfied, I reached into the car and turned the ignition off. The engine died painfully, whereas Chad probably never felt a thing. Just as I suspected, they never brought anything to trade. The only things in there were a lighter and a bong. They had no other plan in mind other than killing Rick and me, and then taking what they wanted. If they had succeeded and had found Julie, well, I'm sure it would not have been pleasant. The interior reeked of marijuana. I had no doubt they had gotten high on their drive over here. I guess they needed it for courage. I straightened. Julie still had the assault rifle pointed at Chad, so I put my hand gently on the barrel and got her to lower it. "Was there anyone else?" I asked. She blankly looked at me and shook her head. I looked again at Chad, back at Julie, and gave her a kiss on the forehead. "Good job, girlfriend," I said with pride. I'm not sure what I was expecting. A proud grin? A high five? What I got was Julie suddenly bursting into tears and sobbing uncontrollably. I reached out, took the rifle from her hands, and held her as gently as I could. I mean, I had 2 weapons in my hands at the moment. She cried quite hard for a few minutes. Hard enough where the tears were like waterfalls and snot drooled out of her nose like a freshly turned zombie. I let her cry. I stood there quietly and held her. I guess it was the overwhelming realization that she had just killed a real live human being. She did not know it yet, but she did well. I was not going to tell her the circumstances. Specifically, I was not going to tell her Chad had never fired a shot. It appeared he was not even armed. In a civilized society, her act could be called murder. But I knew it was necessary. He knew where we lived. I could not allow it. However, I did not want Julie to think of herself as a murderer. If she ever asked, I did not know if I was going to fabricate a story or tell her the truth. I crossed that bridge when I got to it. After a minute or two, she seemed to gather her senses just a bit, and I thought it was over. "Zach, there's something I have to do." Her words came out in between sobs. I let go of her and stood back. "Okay, sweetheart. You name it," I responded. She fumbled with her pants, succeeded in pulling them down, and then squatted right where she stood. It sounded like a Jersey cow pissing on a flat rock. I stared at her in amazement. She must have been holding it in for hours. She continued, and continued, and continued. And the whole time, she was sobbing like a baby. Chapter 22. A New Friend. After Julie finished emptying her milk jug-sized bladder, she stood up, zipped up, and gave me a harsh stare. "Enough of this bullshit. I want to get my little brother." I tried to keep a straight face. I mean, the swollen red eyes, the tear-streaked cheeks I was fine with. It actually was endearing. But she had these 2 really long snot trails streaming out of both nostrils. They were like hanging down, but they defied gravity just enough to prevent them from breaking free of her nose. I turned quickly before she saw me smiling and renewed my inspection of the remains of Chad Smith. "I think we can do that." I stood there with my hand over my face as if in deep thought, which I sort of was, but I was mostly hiding my stupid grin. I resisted the urge to call her Snotface or something equally juvenile. "What about your mother?" I asked through my fingers. "The hell with my mother. I want my little brother. He'll be safer and better off with the 2 of us." I think she realized what I was trying hard not to stare at. She untied one of the burlap bags that was around her head and shoulders and used it to wipe her face before throwing it on the ground. I was about to tell her to stop wasting stuff, but stopped myself. Now was not the time. I shrugged with agreement. "All right, let's do it. I'm thinking we should get the service van we have parked up the road. We've got to get rid of these bodies first. If we don't, they'll attract vermin and zombies. So we load up the bodies, dump them in the sinkhole, and go get your little brother." Julie nodded. "I knew you'd think of a good plan. Let's get going." She did not even wait for me to respond. She started purposely walking down the highway. I hurried to catch up, and started trying at least to formulate a worthwhile plan. Her mother, Trina, and even Macy might not care much for us to show up and claim Tommy. If we agreed to take them into the fold, it would probably make it easier, but to be quite honest, there was no way in hell I was ever going to accept Trina with open arms. If the two women were really holding Macy hostage, we might actually have to harm them. I had no problem with it, but I knew Julie would not hurt her mother, even if she was presently resenting the hell out of her. It could be a problem, and I wasn't sure how it would end. I was still thinking it through when we drove the van back to the bridge. I got out and guided Julie as she backed up to the bodies. I got the rear doors opened and we were about to start loading when I heard a horse whinny. I peered around the van. A cowboy was riding up on a beautiful Appaloosa horse. When I say cowboy, I'm saying he had a cowboy hat, pointy-toed boots with stirrups, and a weathered duster. He was an older guy, I'd say around 50, tall, raw-boned and lanky, with a deeply weathered face. He reminded me a bit of Rick. He held a rifle casually across the saddle. It looked like a stainless model of a varmint rifle with a scope attached. I let my hand drift close to my holster and stood close to the rear of the van. I whispered at Julie, "Grab the AR, but don't point it at him." As he approached, I waved. He responded with a wave, but kept his rifle handy. Even so, it looked promising so far. He stopped about 20 feet away from the van and casually looked around. "Howdy," he said evenly. He gazed at the bodies with no change of his expression. "Good afternoon," I replied. "I seem to have come at a bad time," he said. I shrugged a shoulder. "I heard all the shooting and thought I'd come see if I could help out. Looks like you two took care of it, though." He peered closer. "Were they those infected things?" "No, sir. I'm afraid these were real people," I said plainly. He nodded but offered no comment. "My name's Fred McCoy. I live down the highway about a mile or so. I'm looking for my baby brother." I walked up and offered my hand. Zach Gunderson." I nodded over my shoulder. "This is Julie Frierson. We're very pleased to meet you." He shook with a calloused hand and tipped his hat at Julie. Julie waved, but was warily keeping the rifle handy. "I'm sorry, Fred, but we've not seen any real people in quite a while. Well, except for these." I made a sweeping gesture. I tried to explain. I knew these people previously, and I tried to be hospitable. Unfortunately, they had other things in mind. He looked up the hill and gestured toward the house. "This is the Parsons farm. They had a tenant living in the house. Fellow by the name of Sam Hughes, I believe. Is he around?" He was testing me. I knew it. I hoped Julie knew it and did not say anything to get this man's hackles up. We needed friends, not enemies. "Well, sir, you are right about the Parsons, but I never heard of a Sam Hughes. My coworker, Rick Sanders, lives here. He's the foreman for the Parsons. I worked for him. When my grandmother died over Thanksgiving, I moved in here with him." I pointed a thumb at Julie. "Now, my girlfriend lives with us. The Parsons were in their winter home in Florida when all of the zombie stuff started happening. I haven't seen them since. Ironically, the Parsons' winter home was in Winter Haven. Honest." He took in what I said, chewed on it, and slowly nodded. "Is Rick around?" "Yes, sir, he is, but he's not available at the moment." I did not explain further, and he did not ask. He gestured toward the bodies. "They'll need burying. I'll be glad to give you a hand. We can use that backhoe there." "I'd be glad for the help, but we have a bit of a pressing matter at hand." I motioned at Julie again. "She has a baby brother as well. He's 10. He is currently in the custody of some people that are tied up with them." I pointed at the bodies. These three were a part of that group. Julie believes, and I must agree, that her brother will be better off living with us. We're going to dump these bodies down the road for now. Julie would like to get her brother immediately. Once we have him home, safe and sound, I'll dispose of the bodies properly. He digested what I said for a moment, and then motioned with the brim of his hat toward the setting sun. "It's going to be dark soon. Very risky to travel at night nowadays. Lots of black ice still on the roads, and that van could slide off in the ditch before you know it. If you can hold off a bit, I'll help you get everything tended to here. Then, if you'd like, tomorrow I'll go along with you two." He looked over at Julie. "Ma'am, I'd be happy to help you get your baby brother back. I'd hate to have him suffer the same fate as my baby brother." Julie was perplexed. "What happened? I thought he was alive." Isn't that why you're looking for him? I must admit, his statement perplexed me as well, and then it came to me. I snapped my fingers in realization. Your baby brother. Would he happen to be a rather large baby brother? Fred stared at me quietly, somberly. You've seen him then. I explained the encounter that Julie and I had with the huge behemoth Fred referred to as his baby brother. I omitted the nakedness part, and immediately afterward, Julie and I engaged in perhaps the most intense act of fornication known to what was left of mankind. Fred listened quietly. When I was finished, he slowly put the rifle in a saddle holster and dismounted. Let's get these bodies taken care of, and then I'd like you to take me to my brother. We loaded them up in the van and hauled them to the sinkhole, while Fred followed on his horse. I drove slowly on purpose. I needed to think of the proper words to say about the late baby brother McCoy. The sinkhole came into view too quickly. We stopped and got out. Mr. McCoy, Call me Fred, please, he said. I nodded and cleared my throat. Ah, Fred. About this sinkhole, Rick and I have been using it to burn trash, and, we came to the conclusion the best way to dispose of infected dead was to burn them. I was not sure how he was going to react, so I paused a moment. Zach, are you saying my brother is in the sinkhole? He asked. I nodded reluctantly. He got off his horse and walked over to the edge. The corpse was burned beyond recognition. He stared a long couple of minutes in silence. We have no idea if people that are infected will infect other people after they are dead. And some of those news stories said the dead could reanimate into these zombie things. This method seemed a prudent means of containment. I could have related a few historical anecdotes to give my logic some weight, but Fred did not seem the type of person who liked big talkers. I chose silence. He slowly nodded in understanding and looked at me somberly. You did what you thought was the proper thing, Zach. He pointed. Is that another body? He asked. I nodded. Another zombie, or was it like one of them? It was Susan Riggins. She wandered up one day. She had turned, I said. Fred sighed. I knew her. I imagine Henry is dead too, walking around somewhere, infected. He took his hat off and wiped his forehead with his shirt sleeve. I'm going to carry my brother home and give him a Christian burial. I would appreciate the loan of your van. He was quiet a moment. I knew he had turned. He killed my wife and mother-in-law. I wanted to put him out of his misery. I looked up at the sky. It was starting to get dark. Do you want to do it tonight? He nodded. I withheld any derogatory reply. All right, sir. I'll be glad to help. If we use the backhoe on the tractor, we should be able to lift him out a lot easier. Fred agreed, and we went to work. We used some ropes and a tarp. Most of him stayed in one piece. It was not fun. When we got Fred's brother secured, we drugged the recently deceased idiots out of the van and dumped them into the sinkhole. I poured a liberal amount of kerosene on them, added a couple of old tires, and lit them up. It would be a slow burn, and I would have to repeat the process a few more times to get the job completed. Fred watched in silence. Julie stayed behind and cleaned up the mess around the bridge. I drove the van, and Fred followed on his horse. Turns out he lived fairly close. It was an older but nice two-story home. I'd driven past it dozens of times, but never knew who lived there. He had about 100 acres, he said. We dug the hole with the aid of the headlights on Fred's John Deere. He buried his baby brother, also known as Franklin McCoy, next to their mother, and quietly recited the Lord's Prayer. It was very late when I got back. I was exhausted and filthy. I stood on the front porch and stripped off my grime-infested clothing. I would decide what to do with them in the morning. It's me, I said as I opened the door. Julie was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Her assault rifle was right next to her. She smiled tiredly at me. Well, hello, sailor, she said. Do you always walk around naked? I chuckled. My clothes are pretty much beyond hope. Let me get cleaned up and I'll join you in bed. She readily agreed. I went to the bathroom and washed off with a bath rag and soap before crawling into bed next to her. She was wearing one of my t-shirts and socks. Good. Her feet were always ice cold. I snuggled up beside her and kissed her on the forehead. I was dead tired. No extracurricular activities for me tonight. I filled her in about the burial of the late Franklin McCoy. What do you think about Fred? She asked in between a yawn. She sounded as tired as I was. Her yawn instinctively caused me to yawn as well. He's quiet-natured. Stoic would be a good word to describe him. When things started getting bad, he hunkered down in his house with his wife, mother-in-law, and brother. Somehow, his brother had turned. He doesn't know how. They had been isolated from the rest of the world for at least a month, and he had gotten sick somehow. Fred was out tending to his cattle when Frank attacked the women. When Fred returned, Frank had already wandered off. We compared timelines. He said it happened 3 days before Frank had wandered over here. There's no telling what baby brother had gotten into before our encounter with him. He has a daughter who lives somewhere on the West Coast. He had a business, building prefabricated greenhouses. Not the big commercial-sized ones, but smaller ones for yuppies to put in their backyard. Their farm was mostly a hobby. "Do you think he can be trusted?" she asked. "He seems all right. He has plenty of food and a well for water just like us. He's got a couple of his greenhouses set up, and although it was dark, I think I saw some solar panels on his roof. He seems to have a decent setup. We don't have anything he wants. Maybe the pleasure of our company, but that's it. He seems like a bit of a lone wolf, so the solitary life won't be a major annoyance to him, I'm thinking. You know the actor Josh Brolin? Fred looks like him." I stopped talking long enough to realize Julie had fallen asleep. I smiled as I stroked her hair. It had been a long day for her. Hell, it had been a long day for all of us. Chapter 23. A Rescue Attempt. I felt like I slept like a rock, but was still up before sunrise. When I opened the door to let the boys out, Fred was sitting in one of the rocking chairs on our front porch. He nodded at me and continued drinking some coffee out of a thermos. His Appaloosa was grazing in the field and the saddle was sitting on the porch. The horse, a mare, was freshly brushed and looked magnificent. "Good morning," I greeted. "Good morning," he replied. He was wearing the same hat and duster, but it looked like he had on a clean pair of jeans and had exchanged his cowboy boots for some Sketcher brand hiking boots. He had the same rifle leaned up against the porch railing. He nodded toward the horse. "Her name's Prancer. She's a darn good horse." I nodded quietly, as Fred frequently did. Julie and I must have been very exhausted. We never heard him ride up. Funny, none of the dogs had barked at him. They scampered over and sniffed him up and down. He gave each of them a pat, and then they ran off to empty their bladders. "So, young Zach, do you have a specific plan in mind for rescuing Julie's little brother?" "I believe I do. Julie is positive she can lead us back to the house where they are staying, and then..." "Okay, but before we talk about it, I'd like to hear about what led up to you killing those men yesterday." Fred said it plainly, matter-of-factly. I could not read what he was thinking. Was he being judgmental? I inhaled. "Well, it all started a few months ago, back in high school. I started with my brief romance with Macy and went from there. I tried to provide all of the pertinent details. I told him how Rick had perceived that the apocalypse was actually going to happen and had done a good job of planning for it. I recounted how we met the Friersons. I summarized our falling out and how we had evicted them. I then described the circumstances of finding Julie and how we reunited. I shyly admitted we were now more than just friends. I caught him smiling a bit when I spoke of it, but he remained silent. I then recapped the first meeting with Jason and Macy. I imagine it was pretty tough seeing those two together after everything that had happened, Fred opined. I shrugged. When they drove up, the first emotion I had was contempt. After I started talking with them, I actually started feeling pity. I was happy Macy was alive, but I had no feelings one way or another about Jason. I wasn't jealous. Any personal feelings I once had for Macy have faded. I imagine the feelings I now have for Julie had a lot to do with it. Does it make sense? I asked. Fred slowly nodded. I went into how the Friersons had joined up with Jason and his group. Fred interrupted at that point. "And one of those boys at the bridge is the one who tried to rape Julie?" Fred asked. I nodded. He looked down at his empty cup a moment. "You knew they were going to set you up." I nodded again. Rick taught me to have a contingency plan always. I planned for it, but had hoped I was being overly paranoid and it would work out for the better. "Your suspicions were on the money, it seems," Fred said. "I was hoping for a more peaceful outcome," I replied. "You took a knife to one of those boys." I sat silently for a moment. Fred glanced over at me. "To be honest, Fred, I used a knife on 2 of them. I shot one and finished him with a knife to the jugular. The other one was Jason. He was ultimately the one who betrayed me. As to why, well, I'm not sure I can explain where it makes sense." I could have shot him, but I was very angry. It probably sounded bad, but it was the truth. I was not going to apologize for it. Fred grunted and refilled his plastic cup. Alright, so on to this rescue plan. Are you planning on killing everyone or what? The house is in a gated neighborhood in Brentwood. If you're serious about helping us... Fred confirmed his willingness with a small nod. Good. I was thinking we could keep it simple. I'm thinking of having Julie go up and knock on the door. I'll stay back a little bit, just in case. Since none of them knows you, I'd like you to stay out of sight and provide security with your rifle, just in case it goes bad. I'm assuming you are a decent shot. Fred nodded slightly. I guess I'd have to take his word for it. Okay, as far as we know, the only ones who are still there are Julie's mother, little Tommy, Macy, and a girl named Trina. I paused a moment before continuing. Fred, I'll be honest with you. I don't want the rest of them to join us. Just Tommy. But I've no desire or reason to hurt any of them. I guess I'd do whatever it takes, though. It will just have to be up to how they respond. If I have to invite Macy and Janet to come live with us, so be it. Not Trina, though. What if they say yes? Would it work out? Especially after what Janet tried? Fred asked quietly. I threw my hands up and shook my head. I have no idea. Julie wants her little brother back. I don't blame her. I figure, get Tommy back and deal with the rest of it later. Fred rocked back in his chair and sipped his coffee for a moment before speaking. Sounds agreeable enough. We don't shoot anyone unless we have to. I'm good with that. We were on the road 30 minutes later. I returned to the location on Old Hickory Boulevard where I found Julie. She had no problem with tracking her route back to the neighborhood. The house was 2 blocks down from the gated entrance. I stopped at the entrance and let Fred out. The gate appeared as though somebody had smashed through it with their vehicle. It made me think of Rick, and I smiled. Are you ready to do this? I asked Julie. You're damn right I'm ready. The house is down the street. First left and third house on the left. I repeated the information to Fred. He nodded and took off at a trot. I slowly drove toward the house. I stopped just before turning onto the street. We got out and started walking. Since we knew they were unaware Julie was now living with me, it was agreed she'd walk up by herself and knock on the door while I hid. She'd try to coax Tommy outside and we would snatch him. If she were unsuccessful, we were going to storm the house at gunpoint, whatever it took to get Tommy. On the ride over, I came to a decision. I was willing to let Macy and Janet come with us, if it was going to be the only way we'd get Tommy. But Trina was going to be on her own. She was not my friend and never had been. I voiced this to the two of them, and they agreed. If anything went wrong, or if we encountered violence, Fred assured us he would shoot anyone who appeared to be a threat. As it turned out, none of it mattered. Trina was sitting on the front steps. She made eye contact with us, but did not move. I was a bit confused. I expected her to give a shout of alarm, shoot at us, or something. Instead, she sat there smoking a cigarette. I stopped beside a car with flattened tires. Just use the hand signals, I said to Julie. We'll start shooting if anything goes wrong. Julie nodded. I pressed the mic on the walkie. Fred, do you copy? Roger, I'm in position, he replied tersely. I acknowledged and turned to Julie. If anything happens, get out of the line of fire. Fred and I will be shooting. If any zombies pop up, run like hell for the van. I grabbed her hand. If Tommy is still here, we're not leaving without him. You have my word. She nodded gratefully and approached Trina. Trina watched Julie approach silently. She continued smoking, but otherwise did not move. I had not intended for her or anyone else even to see me. Rookie mistake. Next time we got into this type of situation, I was definitely going to plan it out better. Rick probably would have pointed out that we did not even conduct a recon mission first. I did not want anyone shooting at me out of the windows, so I took a knee beside the car. It suddenly occurred to me if they were smart, they'd have someone set up in a second-floor window of one of the houses across the street. I quickly started scanning the windows. It didn't matter. After a moment, Julie crossed her hands behind her back and then motioned me to come to her. Fred, I'm going to join Julie and see what's up, I said quietly. He clicked the mic. Everyone is gone except Trina, Julie said as I walked up. I frowned and gave a questioning look. Trina said when she woke up this morning, all of them were gone. They must have left sometime during the night. Now that I was closer, I scrutinized her closely. She was not the same Trina that I remembered. The old Trina was rather thick. Large breasts, large waist, and bulbous buttocks. This Trina was saggy, droopy, and practically anorexic. And she smelled like diarrhea. I cleared my throat. Jason said you and Janet were holding Macy at gunpoint. Trina scoffed. It was all Jason's idea. She looked at me. He's a devil in disguise, but you know that already. Do you know where they went? I asked. Fuck that, I'm checking the house. Julie interrupted before Trina could answer, and walked off before I could say or do anything. So I did what any manly man would do. I hurried after her. It was a large house. There were 6 bedrooms, and each room had its own full bathroom. It was very nice, except for all of the filth. The latest occupants were not clean people. The whole house smelled like a locker room. There was debris everywhere, and the toilets were filled with trash and excrement. Very nasty. But there was no Tommy. There was nobody at all, just like Trina said. Finished with our search, we walked back outside. Trina had not moved. Okay, Trina, where did they go? I asked. Trina shrugged her shoulders. Julie grabbed her by her chin. Listen, bitch, I want to know where my little brother is. I gently grabbed Julie and eased her away from Trina. Julie glared at me. I raised my palms out. Just wait, I whispered, and turned back to Trina. Trina, we don't want any trouble. We just want to check on Tommy and make sure he's okay. Could you help us out here? Trina continued staring at a vacant point in space. She was defeated. She had given up. I could see it in her face. I squatted down to where my face was level with hers. Only then did she look at me. Where's my Uncle Tay? Where are Darius and Jason? They're dead, Trina. They came at us with the intent of killing us. They lost. Trina did not move. I figured as much when they didn't come home last night, she said and looked over at Julie. I didn't know you hooked up with Zach. Julie did not bother answering. Trina drew on her cigarette before continuing. I don't know where they went. Your mama said something about Nashville, but I don't know why they'd go there. Nothing but zombies in Nashville. Thousands of them. She seemed to lose focus, but then turned her head back to me. We're all gonna die. I almost felt sorry for her at that moment. Hell, I was very close to hauling her butt back to the van, and then the radio crackled to life. Zach? Fred was whispering. We got zombies, about 24 of them. They're all in one group, 1 block over. They were close. Too close. I motioned to Julie. She heard Fred loud and clear. We began running toward the van. I tried talking on the radio between hurried breaths. It was a lot harder than the movies portrayed it. Fred, can you make it back to the van, or do I need to drive to you? He responded calmly. Drive straight ahead and make a right at the next street. Be watching for me. I clicked the talk button in acknowledgement as Julie and I got into the van. Fred emerged out of the front door of a house just as I turned and jumped in the passenger side. There's a whole passel of them. He pointed down the street. I never seen them grouped together like that before. I looked, and sure enough, there were 20 to 30 of them shambling along, slowly and steadily. They were in various states of dress and decomposition. I used an empty driveway to turn in, back up, and turn around. The sound and movement of the van apparently attracted them. A couple of them actually reached out as if to grab us, even though they were still half a block away. I began backtracking our way out of the neighborhood. Fred, I got some theories about them, which means I'm doing a lot of guessing, but I think the cold weather slows them down. They're moving like old, ugly people. Fred looked in the passenger mirror at the retreating forms. He nodded in agreement. My earlier assessment of Fred's demeanor had not changed. He was very quiet-natured. Taciturn would be a good word to describe him. Did you find the kid? I looked in my rearview mirror at Julie. She was quiet as well, just sitting there, staring at nothing in particular. Everyone is gone except Trina. She believed Julie's mom and Tommy may be headed toward Nashville. Macy might be with them as well, I said, and waited for an emotional outburst from him. Okay, I'm joking. Fred nodded and then looked out the window as if we were out on a Sunday drive. We have plenty of daylight left. I'd like to leave this neighborhood, cover a route toward Nashville, and see if we can happen upon them. If, along the way, we see anything which we might be able to use, we'll grab it. He nodded. What kind of car do you think they're in? Fred did not bother asking if I thought they were on foot. That'd be stupid with all of these zombies around. I answered his question. One of the men, Chad, had a baby blue BMW 4-door. It wasn't in the garage, and I didn't see it parked on the street. That's what I'm guessing. I'll keep an eye out, he said with heated emotion. Well, okay, not really. We drove a route in which I assumed Janet might have driven in order to go to Nashville. The truth be told, there were multiple routes from Brentwood to Nashville. I just picked one and went with it. Julie did not know any better. Fred kept any opinion he had to himself. We encountered zombies here and there, aimlessly wandering the roadways. I drove around them while they moaned and reached for us. Why do they walk along the roads? Julie asked. I'm guessing they're merely following a path of least resistance, at least until they sense something edible. I just discovered another zombie rule and made a mental note. I don't think they are communicating. More likely, they're randomly encountering each other and then stick together. A pack mentality type of behavior, so to speak. Either we drove around them, or if we could not, we would turn down side streets. Fred agreed the best course of action for now would be to avoid them, if possible. There were a few houses on fire when we drove down Franklin Pike, multiple wrecked or burned cars, and a few corpses. Occasionally, we saw a pack of dogs roaming. Those dogs could be dangerous when they get hungry enough. As if we don't have enough to worry about, I said, mostly to myself. Julie and Fred seemed to be in their own respective worlds. I knew what Julie was thinking about. I could only assume Fred was thinking about his daughter and the recent loss of his family. We did not see a single blue BMW anywhere. At one point, we passed a tow truck going the opposite direction. Hey, look! Live people! I stopped the van and waved out of the window. I was kind of hoping they would stop too, and maybe we could make some new friends. There were two of them in it, an older man and woman. They did not even slow down and passed us by without even a wave. I grunted. Fred was so devastated that he could not even speak. I eventually worked our way over to Harding Place. There were no less than 3 pharmacies at the intersection of Trousdale and Harding. 2 of them had been burnt to the ground. The third one, a CVS store, was still mostly intact. The windows were broken out, and it was obvious it had been looted. I avoided some large potholes and stopped in the street. There might be something left that we could use. What do you think, Fred? I asked. Sure, let's give it a look. Julie stood guard outside while we cleared the interior. We slowly rounded each aisle, one by one. Suddenly, Fred gave a small hiss. I glanced over and he nodded at the next aisle over. I peeked through a crack in between the store fixtures. Then I saw it. It used to be a middle-aged man. He was wearing a white lab coat. I wondered if he was the store's pharmacist. I held up one finger to Fred and pointed where the zombie was. I started edging closer when Fred gave another hiss. I looked back at him, wondering what was going on. He held up a finger and then gave a small grin. He stepped out into the main aisle and pulled his duster back with his left hand. He stood facing the aisle where the zombie was. He started whistling some unknown tune. I stifled a chuckle as the zombie started moaning. He slowly shambled out into the main aisle. Fred was standing with his feet spread apart. "Draw," he said in that raspy voice of his, and then did something quite amazing. He drew his pistol with his right hand, shot the zombie pharmacist between the eyes, and then holstered the pistol before I even realized he had fired a shot. If I had blinked, I would have missed it. "Holy shit," I exclaimed under my breath as the zombie fell to the ground. "That was incredible." Fred winked. I edged around the zombie and we finished clearing the store. I trotted back to the front entrance. "All clear," I said to Julie. "You want to look around and I'll take watch?" She shook her head. She had not said more than 1 or 2 words since our encounter with Trina. I nodded and went back inside. The store had been severely looted, but it was not totally bare. I grabbed a shopping cart, found some plastic bags behind the counter, and started in. The first place I headed was the birth control section. Sure enough, there were a dozen boxes of condoms left. Whoever had looted this place had emptied the store of all of the food products, beer, and pain medication, but there was still inventory on the shelves a competent survivalist could make use. I loaded the condoms into a plastic bag and looked up to see Fred watching me. Ah, to be young again. "So, is there anything special you want? Besides those, I mean?" he asked. I smiled sheepishly and nodded. "Antibiotics? Are you familiar with any of them?" "A little bit. My mother-in-law was a nurse." His voice caught a bit at her memory, but he recovered quickly. "I'll head back into the pharmacy and concentrate my search there. Any particular brand name I should look for?" "Anything that ends in ILLIN, anything that starts with CEF or CEPH, anything that ends in CIN. He interrupted me. Okay, I got it. He snapped his fingers. I just thought of something. Without the government around, nobody is going to spray for mosquitoes anymore. It'll be like a jungle this summer. Find any and all bug repellents you can. I can't think of anything else at the moment, but I'm sure you will. By the way, good idea about the birth control. He grabbed a plastic bag and walked off without waiting for a response. Our looting ended with just one half-full shopping cart. There was nothing left. He was right about the mosquitoes. They were responsible for more human deaths than any other animal combined. I located several plastic spray bottles of repellent and took them all. When we finished, we left the pharmacy and continued on Harding. I was about to suggest heading back when suddenly, Fred sat up. There is a National Guard headquarters on Powell Avenue and Sidco Drive, not too far from here. A couple of gun stores are also nearby, and lots of businesses. We might find some good supplies, Fred said. I nodded and proceeded ahead. There was indeed a plethora of businesses. We came upon the National Guard location first, or Houston Barracks as it was known. We had to stop about 100 yards away. There were several bodies lying about. I stopped the van and we stared. Lots of decomposition. They're zombies, no doubt about it. I don't see any that are normal-looking ones. It looks like they've all been shot all to hell, Julie opined. She was right. Each zombie had multiple gunshot wounds. A lot of wasted ammo, Fred mused. He retrieved the binoculars and began scanning the various buildings. He handed the binoculars to Julie. Your eyes are younger than mine. Look up at the roof of the largest building. I think I see little puffs of steam. Julie looked. You're right. I see it too. She looked at me. What does it mean? It means the building is probably occupied, I said. The steam is coming from a vent stack for the heating units. I pointed toward the scattered corpses. They're the ones who killed the zombies. It must be soldiers. Julie handed the binoculars back to Fred. He did another scan. I believe you're right, Zach. In fact, we have someone checking us out right now. Chapter 24. Houston Barracks. After a moment, he lowered the binoculars and turned to us. It looked like he called somebody. He's got a walkie-talkie radio and he spoke into it for a spell. Let's see if we can talk to them. I tried CB Channel 9 and 19 several times, but received no response. I grunted and retrieved a can of spray paint out of the van. What are you doing, Zach? Julie asked me. It's a good time to introduce the rules. I walked in front of the van about 10 feet where there was a spot in the road not covered by zombies or gore. Poor shooting discipline, wasted ammunition, a lack of knowledge of Zach's rules of zombies. Time to help them out. I gave the can a good shake and sprayed out all of my previous rules. Then I added a few more. Rule number 8, burn the corpses. Rule number 9, they have a herd mentality. Rule number 10, they follow the path of least resistance. Don't forget to sign it, Julie said. I smiled and added my trademark signature, a capital Z in block form. Julie watched me and then turned to Fred. Well, Fred, did he watch Zach painting? Fred lowered the binoculars. Every word, I believe. It looked like he read it out to his friends on the radio as well. He looked over at me. We can sit here and wait on them, I suppose. Or we can try something else. I looked at him questioningly. I believe if we just get in the van and drive off, curiosity will get the better of them. Julie frowned. We're not going to leave, are we? They might know something about Tommy and Mom. I knew she would be even more upset if we left without trying to talk to these people. All right, I think Fred may be onto something. We have a dozen steaks sitting in the cooler, plus a grill. We'd been keeping the meat on ice, but they were going to turn rancid soon, and we either needed to cook them or throw them out. Let's find somewhere nearby, but away from all of these corpses, and fire up the grill. I'm willing to bet somebody will come check us out. Do we just sit here? Can't we signal them somehow? I gave her a shrug. She was getting impatient. I understood, but there was nothing any of us could do to alleviate that. Fred grunted. Baby girl, they know we're here. They might be a bit worried. They might believe we're up to no good. Fred took his hat off and scratched his head while looking at the buildings. Of course, they could have a sniper in one of the windows about to shoot us. He put his hat back on. I wouldn't try to go through their entry gate uninvited. Fred made a good point. We were hungry, and we all agreed we did not want to eat while in close proximity to a bunch of stinking corpses. There's got to be somewhere close where we can set up, I said as I drove carefully over the bodies. Every few seconds there would be audible crunching noises. Occasionally I'd run over a head and there was a distinctive popping noise like a watermelon exploding. Rick would have laughed in glee. I would have too if it was just him and me, but today, I kept quiet and continued down Sidco Drive. In many places, the bodies were stacked 2 and 3 deep. We traveled about 100 feet before the roadway finally cleared. Fred suddenly straightened. "Let's stop here. The parking lot is clear and the business might have some stuff we can use." I looked at the business he was pointing at. It was a manufacturer for swimming pool heaters. Okay, fine with me. I looked in the back seat to see if Julie would object. She looked at me wistfully, but didn't say anything. I drove in and circled the parking lot. The back gate was open, so I stopped in front of the building. Fred, is there anything in particular we're looking for?" Fred gave a slight nod. "Copper and copper fittings. I told you I was an engineer. I got a few ideas." He was animated now. No, not really. He just kind of dipped his head when he was talking about something he felt passionate about. "We're going to build a greenhouse for you two. I'm going to work on some modifications. We'll need plumbing for irrigation." "Oh," I said, but I was a bit perplexed. There was a Home Depot approximately 4 blocks from us. Plenty of plumbing fittings there. Fred must have read my mind. He pointed back toward Houston Barracks. "We stop here in sight of them, they'll come. You wait and see. Besides, I got a few more ideas as well. Come on, let's go inside and I'll show you." He turned back at Julie. "Baby girl, why don't you set the grill up and get a fire going? I expect we'll have company very soon." He gave her a wink. "We'll fill their bellies up and they'll answer anything we ask them." Julie understood the logic and smiled hopefully. We had no trouble prying open one of the bay doors. We waited a minute to see if the noise we made attracted anything. There was no response, so we went inside and spent the next 10 minutes clearing the building of any possible zombies. We were fortunate. Not a single one. The business had various types of heavy machinery. There was no way we could haul any of it back in the van. We'd need to use a tractor-trailer rig. But there was a lot of material, consisting of tubing, fittings, thermostats, and plain sheets of copper in various gauges. Fred motioned me over and pointed. "We've got everything we need right here to make solar water heaters. The only power you'll need is for the water pump, but we can incorporate solar panels or even fashion a windmill for power." Then Fred did something quite odd. He smiled. "We can make some really good stills, too." "You mean moonshine?" Fred nodded. "Do you drink a lot, Fred?" "Seldom, if ever." Now he gave me a wink. He was very emotional today. "I'm betting there are a lot of survivors who do, though. Alcohol will be an excellent trading commodity." I nodded and smiled in understanding. I had to hand it to him. This man was smart. Besides, a still doesn't have to be used only for alcohol. They make great water distillers as well. He was right. A still could be used for a lot of things. I was about to enumerate a few dozen, and then thought better of it. Fred looked around and shrugged. "Are you getting hungry?" he asked. I nodded. "Me too. We can load up this stuff after lunch." I agreed, and we went back to the parking lot and joined Julie. She had the grill going and had even found some chairs for us to sit in. She looked up at me as I approached. "Do you think this'll work?" she asked. I kissed her on the forehead and sat down. "I think so. Look," I pointed. "You can see a couple of the upper floors of the tallest building. You can bet the soldier with the binoculars is watching us. I don't think they'll ignore us. They'd probably have to talk about it first, but eventually somebody will come to check us out. Probably a squad of 4 or 5 men. We'll talk to them, offer them some food, and most importantly, we'll ask about Tommy." I gave an encouraging smile. I hoped I was right. The steaks were just about cooked when Fred gave us a heads up. A Humvee loaded with 5 soldiers drove up. We waved. They stopped near the entrance about 50 feet away and got out casually. They were in military uniforms and all were armed with M4 automatic assault rifles. I stood and waved again. 2 of them tentatively waved back. I looked at my partners, shrugged, and walked over to our new guests. "Are you men hungry? We've got steaks and boiled corn. We only have water to drink, but it's clean." The smoke was carrying the aroma toward them, and it could even be smelled over the lingering stench. The passenger looked to be in his mid-30s. I could see the rank insignia affixed to his headgear, a silver rectangular bar indicating he was a first lieutenant. As I looked him over, he removed his hat and wiped his brow. His ebony black head was clean-shaven. His features were sharp, chiseled. He reminded me of a track athlete. He was obviously the one in charge, but before he could speak, the driver interrupted. "What's your name, boy?" he demanded. Did he just call me boy? I looked him over. The name tag said Hart, and his rank indicated he was a corporal. He was maybe 20 or 21. He was a couple of inches shorter than me, maybe 5'11". The loose-fitting uniform made it difficult to tell how much he weighed, but nothing disguised his butt-ugly face. He had thick lips that were severely chapped, heavy-lidded eyes, and a greasy face dotted with acne. "Knock it off, Hart," the lieutenant responded. He directed his attention to me. "I'm Lieutenant Ward. I'm in charge here." He pointed at the other two. "These two are Privates Dawson and True." They waved half-heartedly. "And this one is the never-ending pain in my ass, also known as Corporal Leon Hart. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Zach." I pointed to Julie and Fred. "These are my friends, Julie and Mr. McCoy." I leaned forward a little bit toward Leon. "If you see a boy anywhere around here, you just go ahead and knock him down." I punctuated it with a challenging wink. He responded with a humorless smile, showing yellow teeth. They reminded me of kernels of corn. "Are you serious about those steaks?" Private Dawson piped up. "I haven't had a steak in a coon's age." Dawson was obviously from a more rural area. He had a distinct southern twang. He was also one of those people who could go without eating for a week and still be fat. His double chin jiggled when he spoke. It was hard to tell his age, but he appeared to be the same age as Hart. He smiled at me hopefully. I glanced at True. He was a light-skinned biracial man, clean-shaven with just a hint of a mustache. He reminded me of a smaller version of Jason. I hoped it was only a similarity in looks and not the personality. He cradled his M4 in a safe manner, but could bring it on target quickly. He never said a word, just kept scanning the area. I presumed he was watching for zombies, or perhaps he was on the alert for an ambush. Pretty smart. "Of course," I said. "We were hoping to meet survivors, so we brought extras. Come join us by the grill." The lieutenant nodded a tacit approval, and the men walked with me over to where Julie and Fred were now standing. Fred nodded at them, but made no effort to shake hands. Leon leered at Julie and offered his hand. "Wow, you're the most beautiful woman I've seen in quite a while. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance," he said. Julie reluctantly extended her hand. Leon pulled close and kissed it sloppily. Julie yanked her hand back, which caused Leon to chuckle. "Relax, babe. You'll grow to like me. All the women do." His crass remark got a chuckle from Dawson. Leon glared at him. Dawson shut up immediately. "Corporal Hart, could you mind your manners just for a few hours?" Lieutenant Ward said tiredly. It looked like there was an ongoing battle of wills between the two men. I also noticed the lieutenant visibly grimaced when he sat in one of the chairs. Fred glanced at me. He noticed as well. Ward looked over at Private Dawson. "Dawson, get some of those bottles of Gatorade out of the back. The least we can do is share." Dawson grinned and trotted back to the Humvee. Ward looked around and pointed at the building. "What were you two doing in there?" "Waiting on you gentlemen, of course," I said. He looked at me questioningly. We were not sure what kind of reception we'd get if we walked in the front gate, so we went for Plan B. I gestured toward the freshly cooked steaks. "Come on, guys, let's eat." I did not have to say it twice. Julie played hostess and filled each plate with a large steak and 2 ears of corn on the cob. I watched as the men savored every bite. Leon ogled Julie continuously, but she acted as though she did not notice. Fred caught my eye again. I knew what he was thinking. This Hart was potential trouble and would bear watching. Corporal Hart finally turned his attention to me and smiled without humor. "So, Zach, is it? Where are you guys from?" "Well, Leon, we live not too far from here." I pointed out to some nondescript area over his shoulder. "Out in the country. We thought we'd come into town and see if there were any other survivors. Scrounge around for stuff we could use, you know." He grunted. "Just so you know, this building and all these buildings in this area are under military jurisdiction. Nothing leaves without our approval." Fred had remained quiet until now. That's awfully pretentious of you, young man. Perhaps you would be good enough to show us the paperwork giving you this so-called authority. Maybe those stakes are under your jurisdiction as well. Hell's bells, maybe we should ask for your forgiveness for butchering the poor cow. He was leaning casually against the van, and he looked very non-threatening. At least he did to everyone else. Julie and I knew better. Lieutenant Ward was working his mouth trying to phrase a response. Leon reacted by hurling a bottle of Gatorade at Fred. Fred deftly caught it and looked at it. I prefer the purple flavor, but orange will do. Thank you, boy. He emphasized the last word. I liked it. Leon didn't. But Ugly Boy had his M4 slung across his shoulder. He scowled and started to reach for it. I held up my hand and pointed. Lieutenant, is this the way you normally treat people? Is this how the military is supposed to act? Lieutenant Ward pointed at Leon. At ease, Corporal. You're out of line. And get your hand off of your weapon, the lieutenant warned. Leon glared at the lieutenant for a lingering moment, but acquiesced. Lieutenant Ward stared at Hart a moment longer and then looked over at Fred. My apologies to all of you. Yesterday we thought we were going to be overrun by those damn things. The firefight lasted for over an hour. We're all still a little keyed up, right, Hart? Hart was still glaring, but then looked down. Yeah, we've been through hell. Killed a ton of those sons of bitches. I knew then he was the one to watch. He would be the one to cause trouble. If shots were going to be fired, Fred would kill Leon first. I really doubted Dawson would do anything. I kept my attention on True. For some reason, he seemed like the most deadly. Leon was definitely a bully and therefore dangerous, but True was different. I suddenly realized that he acted a lot like Fred. His body position never moved during Leon's antics. He just kept eating while watching the road. I needed to get the tension down. Hey, I understand. We've all been through a lot. There is absolutely no need for us to be hostile to each other. I looked over. Hey, Julie, Private True there looks like he could use another steak and a couple ears of corn. True never turned his head. Instead, his hand shot up and he extended a thumb. How about you, Corporal? How about it, Dawson? Hart's stomach outvoted his hostility. He quickly agreed along with Dawson. Julie refilled all of their plates with the efficiency of a waitress at a greasy spoon. Dawson thanked her profusely. True nodded. Leon tried to make leering eye contact with her, which she pointedly ignored. He didn't get it. Everything settled down then, and for several minutes there were only the sounds of contented eating. Finally, Lieutenant Ward paused long enough to speak. I would really like to debrief you three. I need to know what you guys have been seeing out there. I chuckled. We'll answer most any questions you have, Lieutenant. I looked at Fred and he nodded. Fred and I live out in the country. When the world started going to hell, we bugged in and hunkered down. I sliced a piece of my steak, which was surprisingly tasty, and chewed on it for a moment. We met Julie and her family later. Say, Leon, how's the corn? Leon looked up at me with a mixture of kernels and juice escaping down his chin. He nodded appreciatively. I think we had him calm down, at least until the food was gone. I continued. Julie's become separated from her mother and little brother. Her mother's name is Janet Frierson. Tommy, her little brother, is 10. They might be with a pregnant girl. Have you guys seen anyone who matches that description? Dawson acted as if he wanted to say something, but was worried about the repercussions, so he stared at the ground. Julie saw it also and spoke up. Private Dawson, your jaw dropped when Zach spoke of my family. Have you seen them? He worked his mouth nervously and looked at the lieutenant for direction. I'm pretty sure that your mother and brother are here with us. We all stared at him. Well, not with us right here in the parking lot, but in the barracks with the rest of the civilians, he said. Chapter 25. A Reunion on Sidco Drive. Lieutenant Ward directed Corporal Hart and Private Dawson to drive back to the barracks and fetch them. While we waited, we recounted what we had seen and tried to answer the lieutenant's questions. He listened patiently, absorbing everything we said. When we were finished, he nodded and spoke. If you guys want, we can take you in. We don't have a lot, but it is a good, secure area. We can offer protection against the zombies. Fred scoffed. I shrugged. We're good, thanks, but we appreciate the offer. I stood and began gathering up the trash, piled it up and lit it on fire. You guys need to burn those bodies. Lieutenant Ward chuckled. Oh yes, rule number 8. I watched you paint those. What does the Z mean? Zach. Julie said quickly, with a little bit of pride. She was antsy now and could not sit still. The lieutenant laughed, but caught himself short. A flash of pain went across his face. "I've been sitting too long." He stood slowly, painfully. "I got in a car wreck when all this stuff first started. I messed up my back pretty badly. I probably need surgery, but..." He shrugged awkwardly. "No doctors anywhere." He fished a pill bottle out of his pocket and took a couple. True glanced over briefly. I don't think he liked what he saw, but he said nothing. "How bad is it?" Fred asked quietly. "It's not getting any better." He wiped his hands on his pants. I offered him a squirt of hand sanitizer, which he gratefully accepted. "I suppose it's no use trying to talk you guys into staying. We can always use some more people who know how to use firearms. We got a bunch of civilians who are mostly in the way. All they do is complain and try to shirk work details." "How many?" I asked. I wanted a count to get an idea of how many survivors there potentially were out in the world. "There are 12 soldiers and 15 civilians. We've lost a lot. I used to send out patrols on regular intervals, but too many of them never came back. They either met with trouble or deserted. Now we confine our activities to within a 1-mile boundary around the barracks." "Do you know if there was a FEMA facility set up in Nashville?" I asked. The lieutenant frowned and nodded. "Oh yeah, it was thrown together rather quickly. They used the Titan Stadium as a staging center. The problem with it was infected people were mixed in. It became total chaos within a day or so." He stared out at the roadway. "They all either died or turned. The infection must have spread like wildfire." I finished the sentence for him. He nodded. "That's as good a description as any. We were successful in evacuating a small amount of people and brought them here. It worked out pretty good at first. The infected seemed to stay in or around the stadium. All we've had were stragglers, 1 or 2 here and there. Yesterday they came in a big horde. It was the strangest thing. They all seemed to be acting in concert." "Rule number 8. They have a herding mentality," Julie said. "How long are they going to take, Lieutenant? Can you go get them?" Lieutenant Ward ignored her. He was in his own world at the moment. "I've not had any radio contact with Command in over 2 weeks. The last communication I had was from Cheyenne Mountain through a satellite link, but they're now silent. I'm afraid our government may be lost." He continued, rubbing his back. "You know, I was a human resources manager at a tire factory when this shit started. I'm no real soldier, just a weekend warrior. Houston Barracks is not a combat arms unit. We mostly handled staffing and logistics." He slowly shook his head. "True is the only one who has any actual combat experience. The rest, including me, are just paper pushers. Hart and Dawson are mechanics." "How are you fixed for food and water?" I asked. He scoffed. "We don't have steaks or any other fresh meat, but we've enough MREs for the next 10 years. We got a distiller, so the water is good. We'll be out of fuel soon, though." He looked at us. "How are you guys faring? Do you need any MREs?" "We're doing okay. And no, we're not desperate enough for those things yet. Maybe later," I said. "Do you have any dog food?" He looked over at Private True. True shook his head. I thought for a minute and pointed at the building. "I don't want to sound pretentious here, but we are in need of some materials in there. We need to make our own water distillation equipment. We're not looking to get into some kind of pissing contest about who has jurisdiction over what." He held up his hand. "Don't worry about it. Take what you need." We heard the sound of the Humvee approaching. "Miss Julie, I think your family is here." Tommy spotted us first. "Julie!" he yelled, and jumped out of the vehicle before it was parked and ran over to us. Julie dropped down and gave him a hug. She didn't cry, but she had trouble speaking for a minute. The kid looked okay. A little thin, maybe, not very clean, but otherwise he looked okay. He turned and saw me. His jaw dropped. "Zach!" He ran over and hugged me as well. I was surprised, to say the least. I knelt down and hugged him back. "Hey, big guy. I sure am glad to see you." "Hello, Zach," Janet said icily. She had walked up while I was hugging Tommy. Like Tommy, she had lost weight. Her once curvy figure was now slim, which only accentuated her large breasts. In spite of the hard times, she had managed to take care of herself and was still very attractive. I could see where Julie got her looks. I had no doubt she was receiving a lot of male attention. "What the hell are you doing here?" She practically snarled it. The beauty was obviously only skin deep. She turned to Julie without bothering to wait for an answer. "Hello, Mother," Julie said quietly. Where have you been? I've been worried sick wondering about you. It almost sounded heartfelt. Obviously not worried enough to come looking for me, though, Julie retorted. Don't take that tone with me, young lady. Her tone changed back to a snarl. In fact, her whole demeanor changed at the blink of an eye. Concerned mother to hateful bitch in under a second. I hoped like hell Julie had not inherited this character trait. Julie held up her hand. It's okay, Mom, I get it. You always thought of yourself first, then us kids. I understand now. She looked at me with warmth in her eyes. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I've got a new home. She pointed at me incredulously. With him and that old drunk? What are you there, whore? Before I could blink, Julie took a quick step toward Janet and slapped her. Hard. I think all of us, even Fred, were shocked. She did have a bit of her mother in her after all. No, Mother, I'm not their whore. I'm not like you. Don't disrespect me again, she responded with a threatening tone to her voice. I'm betting Janet had never had her daughter speak to her in such a manner. Janet's mouth opened in shock and surprise. She held her face where she had been slapped and stared at Julie incredulously. Julie returned her glare with a clearly conveyed look of contempt. Janet then looked around at the soldiers. This girl is a minor. She's a runaway. She belongs with me, her mother. She pointed at me angrily. You need to arrest him or something. Corporal Hart stared at me hard. He was the first one to speak up. Well, little buddy, she makes a good point. Julie needs to come with us. Before I could say anything, Julie retorted, The hell I will. She quickly walked to the front bumper of the van where we had leaned our rifles and grabbed one. Don't even think about it, boys, she said gruffly as she flipped the safety off. I have to admit, she looked intimidating. Fred, who was standing nearby with his right hand hovering beside his pistol, looked very intimidating. I had my hand on my Glock, which was in my jacket pocket and ready for action, although I doubted I looked the least bit intimidating. Once again, we had a tense moment. It could go downhill very quickly. I needed to do something. Listen up, guys. Corporal Hart, this is a different world than what it once was. There are no longer any laws dealing with juvenile custody issues or any shit like that. It's all a matter of survival now. I pointed with my free hand at Julie. As for Julie, she's free to stay here or go with us. I think you all would agree. It's her choice and nobody else's. Anyone who thinks differently and tries to interfere, well, I'd say Julie will more than likely shoot you in the ass. Dawson chuckled. Even Private True smiled, which was what I was hoping for. Lieutenant Ward spoke up. Point taken. We're soldiers, not truant officers. Julie is old enough to decide for herself. I turned my attention to Julie's mother. Janet, we'd like Tommy to come with us. He'll be safe with us and he'll be with his sister. Like hell. You and that drunk are the ones who kicked us out, or don't you remember? Janet's tone indicated she thought she was somehow the victim of a terrible sin committed by Rick and me. I nodded. Oh, sure, Zach. You just say we want Tommy to go with us, and his mother will drop to her knees, thanking the heavens for our generosity. Yeah, right. I raised my empty hand in a placating gesture and walked over to her. When I was close enough, I spoke in a low voice. I thought that would be your response. I know you don't like me, and quite frankly, I don't like you. I looked around. Corporal Hart walked closer and was listening intently. I spoke loudly for everyone to hear. We met recently. Her family, and her lover. They were lost and starving. We took them in, and they plotted to kill us in our own home. We made them leave. Julie and I have since reconciled. Janet has chosen to be vindictive. She plotted with some people to kill us. I looked at her pointedly. It didn't go so well for them. Leon arched both his eyebrows in surprise and looked over at Janet for some type of denial or confirmation. He got neither. I gave a placating shrug. So, here's my offer to you, Janet. Tommy comes and lives with us. That'll free you up. Without a kid to care for constantly, you'll be free to be, well, you. The implications of the statement, I hoped, were clear. Whenever we come into town, it'll be our priority for him to visit with you. In addition, I'll make it worth your while. I was now close enough to lean forward and whisper so Corporal Hart would not hear me. I think you know what I mean. We can give you extra food and supplies. You can keep it, trade it, hell, you can throw it all in the garbage if you want. With extra food, you'll have bargaining power, much more than you do now. I straightened. Janet glared at me, and then she glared at Julie. She had no idea who Fred was, but she glared at him too. She waved a dirty finger at all of us. You would really like that, wouldn't you? You've stolen Julie from me. You got Dawn killed, and now you want to take Tommy from me. Are you fucking crazy? I stopped myself from shrugging again. There was somebody here who was crazy, all right? I did not want to do this, but felt I had no choice. All right, fair enough. You are welcome to come back with us too. You and Tommy. We'll all be together. We'll get you set up in your own house near where we live. Oh, and by the way, don't try to blame us for Dawn's death. I know what really happened. She answered quickly, but it wasn't quite the answer that I expected. All of you can go straight to hell. She grabbed her child by the hand and dragged him along as she walked back to the Humvee. Little Tommy kept looking back at his sister as he was being dragged along. Tears were falling on his cheeks. It was hard to watch. Tears started flowing down Julie's cheeks as well. After a moment, she walked back to the van and shut the door quietly. I sincerely doubted Janet was crying. Corporal Hart snorted and grinned in amusement. Whew, boy, she doesn't like you at all. He seemed to take great pleasure in it. Janet shouted at him and ordered him to take them back. He grinned at me again with those yellow teeth, ogled Julie one last time, and hurried back to the Humvee without bothering to get permission from the lieutenant. We spoke a few moments more with Lieutenant Ward and made tentative arrangements to visit again and hopefully work out a beneficial trading arrangement. I'm going to get back to the barracks. The walk may work the kinks out of my back. I wish you all well, he said. We shook hands with Lieutenant Ward and Private Dawson and watched as they walked away. Private True was already walking ahead of them. He did not bother saying goodbye. When they got out of earshot, I sighed. Our first encounter with live human survivors. Seems like it could have gone a little better. Fred snorted. It's not your fault. The lieutenant is a decent sort, but he's injured. Corporal Hart senses weakness in him. He has no respect for him. Probably the others as well. He's not going to be able to hold them together as a cohesive group for much longer, I'm thinking. I agreed with Fred's assessment. I could not see Julie. She was in the van out of eyesight. I knew she was upset. It was time to leave. Hart is definitely a loose cannon. Let's load up the van with whatever we can and get out of here before he gets some ideas and does something stupid. Chapter 26. Adoption. The thunder awakened me with a start. At first, I thought someone was trying to break in, but once I realized what it was, I lay there and listened to the patter of rainfall on the old-fashioned metal roof. It reminded me of past thunderstorms. Back then, it was relaxing, soothing. I tried to let it relax me now, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about the day's work awaiting me. Among all of the other chores, I would need to check the farm to ensure no damage had been caused as a result of the storm. I'd also need to check on the livestock. I'd need to do a lot. I did not think I had anything to worry about, but at some point during the night, the storm was intense enough for the mutts to jump into bed with Julie and me. I was thankful we had given them all a bath just yesterday. I glanced at my wristwatch. It was just after 4 in the morning, which coincidentally was the number of rear ends, 3 ugly dogs and 1 beautiful woman, currently snuggled up against me. I was glad we had found a queen-size bed to replace the old twin-size. It took some finagling to work my way out of bed without waking Julie. I debated on an early morning shower, but realized I was going to be spending a few hours outside in the rain and mud, so settled for washing my face, brushing, flossing, and coffee. I stoked the fire, got the tea kettle going, and walked out on the porch. The boys were awake now and followed me. They needed to do their business, but were reluctant to step off of the covered porch and into the heavy downpour. I helped Larry by nudging him, not so gently, off the porch with my boot. The other 2 followed grudgingly. They ran out, quickly sniffed out a suitable spot, did their thing, and were back on the porch before I had gotten seated. The 3 of them looked at me expectantly. I know, you bastards want to go inside and jump your wet asses back on the bed, but it's not going to happen. They gaped at me with those big puppy dog eyes and acted like they didn't understand, but I knew better. The dawn sky was a dark shade of gray, almost black, but not completely. The sun, even though it could not be seen, still had its omnipotent presence. I rocked contentedly while looking over the front yard. It was a muddy mess. I wondered if it would be worth the time and effort to seed and fertilize it when the weather warmed, or should I leave it looking worn and bare? A well-kept lawn would shout out to anyone that the house was occupied. I made a note to ask Fred's opinion and wondered if he was going to join us this morning. He loved to take Prancer out on morning rides, but I didn't see it happening today. The rain was really coming down. I heard the door open and Julie joined me a few minutes later with 2 mugs of coffee. She was wearing sweatpants, sneakers, and a jacket. One morning, she came outside with nothing more than a blanket casually wrapped around her, only to find Fred sitting in one of the rocking chairs. Since then, she got dressed first. "Thank you, beautiful," I said as she handed me the mug. "You're welcome, handsome," she replied. "Is Fred going to join us today?" "I don't think so. I don't believe he'll get Prancer out in this rain. He dotes on her like a teenage boy in his first love." We chuckled, but my statement had inadvertently made me wonder about Macy. Lieutenant Ward had said she did not arrive with Janet and Tommy. She would be in her 2nd trimester by now. I hope she was okay. I stood up and stretched. "Why don't we grab some eggs and stuff and just drive over to his house? I want to check out the creek anyway, and I can feed the livestock afterward." Julie agreed, and it was decided. We drove in Rick's truck, or I should say Julie drove, which allowed me to run out in the rain, disarm the booby traps, move the backhoe and wire, and then move them all back again before we left. One day, I was going to need to build a sturdy gate. Fred was sitting on his own porch when we drove up. "I tried to raise you 2 on the CB," he said to us as we walked up. None of us had extensive knowledge of the ham radio system, and the repeaters had gone down several weeks ago. Channel 1 on the CB radio was 26.965 megacycles. We opted to use that channel for talking and scanned the other channels for any radio chatter. It was much simpler. I didn't have the radio on. Sorry about that. I unhooked the antenna cable last night to prevent a lightning strike from frying it. "We brought some breakfast. Are you hungry?" Fred nodded hungrily. Or, more accurately, he gave his typical curt nod and led us inside. His furnishings were of the pseudo-rustic farm style, a product of his wife's decorating tastes, Fred had told us. It gave the house a homely ambiance. We all migrated into the kitchen and then worked as a team preparing a nice country breakfast. Julie cooked up the eggs, Fred worked on the country ham, and I made biscuits. Fred had a milk cow and a pasteurizer, which was a nice luxury nowadays. We got everything ready and sat down at the table. Fred insisted on prayer before we started. He told the Lord we were grateful and thanked him for his kindness. We had a good meal in front of us. I supposed, all things considered, I was indeed grateful. I had lost a lot, but I had survived. I was healthy. I had a home. And I had Julie. "I was not a religious man before I met my wife," he said a moment after he had finished. "Oh, yeah?" I sort of asked, but I did not think we'd get any more of a response. Fred did not talk much, and he definitely did not talk much about his family. He proved me wrong on this occasion. "I was a bit of a hellion in my younger days. After graduating high school, I got on with the rodeo circuit and was a trick shot artist. It certainly explained why he was so quick and accurate with those pistols. My father had taught me how to ride and shoot. He was a former Texas Ranger. I was pretty good at it, if I do say so myself. One day I was in a rodeo at the agriculture center here in the county. I had gotten myself thrown off of a bronco and was cussing up a storm about it when I saw her in the stands. I was dumbfounded. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I was in love right then and there. Then the damn horse kicked me. We laughed, and even Fred smiled. Yeah, he caught me on the side of the head, just enough to knock me silly. We continued chuckling. "What happened then?" Julie asked. "That's when I met Connie Sue. They had carried me to the back area where they had an ambulance and paramedics standing by. I had a knot on my head the size of a softball. She left the stands and came to see me." Fred smiled again at the memory. I said hi, and she told the paramedics they needed to wash my mouth out with soap. We laughed harder now. She was the daughter of a preacher, and cussin' was taboo with her. His smile faltered, and he looked out of the kitchen window at the rain. "We would have been married 23 years this spring." He looked down at his plate of scrambled eggs, and then at us. "We only had one kid, a daughter. There were complications, and Connie Sue couldn't have any more kids afterward. So, needless to say, we spoiled Betsy rotten." Julie reached over and put her hand on Fred's. "Fred, where's Betsy now?" Fred's demeanor changed. The muscles around his mouth tightened just slightly. If you blinked, you would have missed it. As I said, Fred was not a man of emotion. "She wanted to be an actress. She moved to Los Angeles. It was hard on us having our little girl grow up and move out. She's a good girl, though. She called her mother and me on Skype every morning. She'd actually landed a small role in some kind of romantic comedy type of movie. But that was just before all of this started. He was looking at a blank spot on the wall, but now focused on Julie. "You remind me of her," he commented. I smiled, but inwardly, I was concerned about the location. Los Angeles was one of the first U.S. cities Rick and I put a red thumbtack on. He squeezed Julie's hand before letting go. "I have to place my faith in the good Lord that she's doing okay. Maybe one day she'll come back home." "Have you ever thought of going out to Los Angeles and finding her?" she asked. "Sure I have. At least 1,000,000 times. But even if I made it across the country in one piece, I would have no idea where to look for her." He pointed to a small laptop with a solar panel hooked up to it. "I know the internet is not working, but I have it open to Skype, just in case." "Tell us about your brother," I asked. Fred smiled a bit. "He was a big one, wasn't he?" I readily agreed. "He was big even as a kid. He weighed 11 pounds when he was born. He had great potential in sports, wrestling, football, you name it. But he just didn't have the competitive drive for it. He was a big, overgrown kid with a heart of gold. A gentle giant was a good way to describe him. He was the kind of person that you always wanted to have around. He ended up being an elementary school teacher. The kids loved him. Hell, everyone loved him. He helped me with the greenhouse business when he wasn't playing with the kids. Somehow, he got the bug and turned. When everything started going bad, we all hunkered down here. We had plenty of food, water, the usual stuff. Everything was going pretty good. No confrontations with any zombies or hostile strangers. We were just keeping to ourselves. We figured one day it would all blow over. The TV stations would come back to life and the news people would tell us order had been restored. Well, you all know how it went." Fred paused a moment before continuing. "Frank got up one morning and he said he didn't feel well. I told him to stay in bed and rest." He paused again and sighed. "I should have known better. He had been a picture of health his entire adult life. Hadn't been sick since he was a little kid. When I got back after tending the cattle, he had already turned. He killed my wife and mother-in-law." He pointed into the den. "He got a hold of my mother-in-law in there. Connie Sue must have been outside and didn't hear anything. I found her in the yard. After killing them, he took off. I buried them, spent a little time mourning, and then went hunting him. That's when I met you two. Aside from Betsy, they were the last of my family." Fred finished the last of the breakfast quietly. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and surprisingly grinned at us. "You two kids are my family now. I hope it's not something you find disagreeable." I was stunned and looked over at Julie. There were sudden tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I think I speak for Julie when I say that we're honored that you have such a high opinion of us." Julie nodded, jumped up, and gave Fred a hug. Fred nodded awkwardly and grabbed his napkin. "You keep that up and I might start crying myself." We all laughed and hugged. The only thing missing were the Three Stooges sniffing our asses. We spent the morning helping Fred around his farm. At noon, we broke for lunch. After, we talked him into showing us his shooting skills. The rain had stopped temporarily. The sky was still overcast, and we could hear an occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. We went out behind the barn and set up some targets. "All right, kids, you two seem to know the fundamentals of gun safety, but I want to go over them again and make sure," he said. Julie and I nodded. "First, always assume the gun is loaded. So that means you don't play around with it and point it at each other, right? Which leads to the second basic rule. Always be mindful of where the barrel of the gun is pointed. Imagine there is a deadly laser beam coming out of the end of the barrel, and wherever it is pointed, that beam will burn right through it. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until you're on target and ready to fire. And finally, rule number 4, always be mindful of what's behind your target. You don't want to kill someone you care for accidentally. Okay, are you two ready?" I smiled and nodded. I had basically given Julie those exact same instructions a couple of weeks ago, which, coincidentally, were the same instructions Rick had given me about a year ago. Julie nodded attentively and said nothing. Good for her. He nodded curtly. "Good. Now I'm going to show you two the fine art of the fast draw, a technique called instinctive aiming and the 1,000 repetition rule." Fred was amazing with his shooting skills. He would draw his pistol, shoot around, and then holster his pistol in the blink of an eye. Then he'd do it again and put the second bullet into the hole from the first bullet. It was amazing. After showing off his skills for a minute, he spent a while instructing us the proper techniques for the quick draw. We then practiced with paper pie plates. It was fun. I thought I knew how to shoot, but Fred proved I was still an amateur. We had each gone through 100 rounds in no time. I questioned Fred about this, but he told me not to worry, he had plenty. Afterward, we went back to Fred's barn and cleaned the 6 shooters. "Fred?" Julie asked. He looked over. "You never said what the 1,000-year rule was." Fred shook his head slightly and corrected her. "Sure I did, but it's not the 1,000-year rule. It's the 1,000 repetition rule. In order to gain proficiency of any act, you need to do it at least 1,000 times." He holstered one of his pistols and drew it out slowly, exactly like he had shown us earlier. "Practice drawing the weapon out of its holster slowly and with perfect form. Do it 1,000 times in order to develop proper muscle memory. Once you've done that, you can draw the pistol out and put it on target like this without even thinking about it." Fred drew the gun out deftly and quickly. "Then, once you've got to this point in your training, practice it 1,000,000 more times. Only then will you be able to draw it like this." He drew the pistol out with lightning speed. He repeated it a couple of more times for emphasis. Julie and I were properly impressed. Fred gave the pistol a fancy reverse spin, holstered it deftly, and glanced over at me. "Okay, enough of the pistol lessons for today. It's my turn. Zach, I've heard you mention a time or two you have some sort of theory about these zombies. I'd like to hear it." I shrugged as I worked the cleaning brush through my barrel. All the way through, all the way back out. "I'm not sure any of my theories have any type of scientific foundation to back them, Fred. Heck, I didn't even graduate from high school." Fred pressed. "Even so, I'd like to hear it." I removed the brass cleaning brush and replaced it with some clean gauze before I answered. I took a deep breath. The smell of gun cleaning solvent was heady. "Okay, well, how to start? Somehow, a person becomes infected. There was a lot of speculation about the cause and origin, but I don't think I ever heard a definitive reason given. Something takes over the body. I don't know if it is a parasite, a virus, or perhaps something altogether different. There were some news reports and computer blogs saying the infected person actually dies and then is somehow reanimated. I'm not so sure about that, but again, I don't have the knowledge or enough data to determine if it's true or not. What I do know is an infected zombie is decomposing. They're rotting. The fact they are decomposing almost begs the question, do they need to eat live meat in order to regenerate? It's possible, I suppose, but we're not seeing any regeneration. I believe the desire for living meat is just a consequence of the infected person's brain reverting back to its primal state. Again, I don't have anything to back up my hypothesis, only some deductive reasoning based on my very limited information. For instance, they don't seem to attack each other, at least not after the infection is set in. Why? Is it because they instinctively know when a person is infected? It's odd behavior for which I have no explanation, but it's not really relevant to my hypothesis. "Okay, I'll bite. What is your hypothesis?" Fred asked. "So, here it is. They are going to die out in a relatively short time." They both looked at me in surprise. "Are you kidding? How is it going to happen?" Julie asked. "A decomposing organism is going to have a limited life. A living human is comprised of a lot of stuff, mostly liquid, and as you know, liquid evaporates. The body is dependent upon many things: air, water, sustenance. All of those items are essential for life and regeneration. The cellular structure of a zombie is presumably dead and rotting. It doesn't appear there is any type of functioning circulatory or respiratory system, at least not in a normal manner. I'm betting the digestive system doesn't work either. I bet they don't drink water anymore. Therefore, I don't think a body in such a state is capable of cellular regeneration, which means they can't keep going. Eventually, they're gonna drop and not get back up." I looked at them pointedly. "They're all gonna be dead. Really dead by this time next year, especially if we have a good hot Tennessee summer. Hot weather will speed up the decomposition process exponentially. We just have to survive until then." I paused for a moment. If we really want to know the answers, it will require capturing a few of them and performing experiments. I looked at them and grinned. I don't know about you two, but I have no desire to be up close and personal with any of those stinky things. They laughed and readily agreed. But I'm sorry to say, other real problems will be manifesting themselves. There are more things than zombies we have to worry about. Fred grunted. "You know, Zach, I believe your logic is sound. But you're right. The problems are just starting." Julie was obviously confused. "What are you two talking about?" The infrastructure of the country, for that matter, for most of the civilized world, is entirely dependent on human upkeep and maintenance. Without it, everything will be going to shit, I said. Julie rolled her eyes. So, we'll have more potholes in the roads and the streetlights won't work. Big deal. I chuckled. What? She asked. More than that, much more, I replied and counted with my fingers. Nuclear plants melting down, dams busting, factories with dangerous machinery which weren't properly shut down will be exploding. I thought for a minute. There are going to be numerous fires and explosions. There will also be natural disasters. All of these have the potential to cause massive damage, and none of it will be repaired. I listened to the rain. Fred spoke up. Remember the big flood here in 2010? It caused a lot of damage. Let's see, we had a big tornado in 98, and a huge ice storm in 94. Fred thought a moment and then snorted. I guess the ice storm happened before the two of you were born. The point I'm getting at, Julie, is that they all caused a lot of damage. Those particular disasters were confined to the Nashville area. Now imagine the same stuff happening worldwide. You know, hurricanes, massive snowstorms, forest fires. There was a big tsunami in Indonesia in 2004. Those are just some examples. All of those natural disasters won't stop occurring. They'll keep happening, but the collective recovery efforts will cease. I nodded and spoke up. There are going to be a lot of hazardous material issues as well. I suspect the groundwater is going to become a lot more toxic for the next year or so. Also, a toxic nuclear cloud could come through and kill us all as well. Julie frowned. How can something like that happen? She obviously had not thought of all of these issues. If a nuclear power plant is not properly shut down, it'll melt down. The byproduct will be a toxic nuclear cloud, I said. Is there a plant close by? Julie asked. I nodded. Watts Bar in East Tennessee is the nearest. It's a little over 100 miles from here. I think we're mostly safe. Prevailing weather patterns should keep any toxic cloud away from us. Unless, of course, there is a major storm off the East Coast around the Carolinas at about the same time a plant melts down. Then it'd push it all this way. I pulled my miniature notepad out of my shirt pocket and wrote down the need for a weather station with some type of radioactive monitor. I also added water testing kits for the well water. When I was finished, I continued talking. You know, Fred, it'll be the responsibility of the survivors to recreate a semblance of modern society. If it does not occur, then what is left of civilization will regress back to pseudo-Iron Age hunter-gatherers. All of the tremendous strides mankind has achieved over the past 4,000 years will be lost. It will only take about 100 years to revert, give or take. Fred grunted. And we haven't even discussed what the survivors are going to do. We can most likely see a lot of lawless gangs. We're definitely going to need to expand our group if we want to survive. After a minute, he tilted his head toward the barn door as if someone were going to walk in. What does Rick think about your theories? Julie inhaled sharply and inadvertently dropped her pistol. I looked at her. She knew. Yeah, she had figured it out, but never said anything. I gently set the pistol down and placed both of my hands on the bench. After a moment, I came to a decision. I guess it was time to tell them the truth. I took a deep breath. I woke up one morning, the day after Christmas to be exact, and Rick was dead. He had died in his sleep. I don't know the cause. Maybe a heart attack? I choked up a little bit. I had suppressed the pain of losing him, and now it was threatening to break through like a dam had burst. There's an old Indian mound down by the creek. I buried him there. I know that mound, Fred said quietly. It's got history. I coughed and cleared my throat. I made sure he would not turn into a zombie, so you two need not trouble yourself asking me about the details. They were silent then and made a point of not noticing my tears. Good. I went back to cleaning the pistol.